Okay, this is a video I would rather have not to make, but I feel I have to. I don't feel I have to address it because I've addressed it already. But this was when I addressed this issue in the past, which I'll get to in a minute, was right after the pitch data presentation that went on Quantum Eraser's channel, and I addressed it and pulled it apart. Yet some people want to continue pushing this. You know, it's ridiculous. And I showed, like what I'm going to show here now is just a very visual way of showing how wrong it is. The claims I'm going to show that are being made by our opposition. What I showed in the past were other ways, and I have more ways of showing how what they try to claim is happening during flight can't happen, right? And isn't happening, right? Because there's certain parameters to do with the plane and that would have to be in place that are not in place. Basically, and it can't put them into place because of the lift effect, right? Planes can't do what they needed to do. That's about the size of it. Long story short, I'm going to address this issue, this stupid argument about how, and this is a correct summation of the claim being made by these people, right? That horizontal changes its own orientation in relation to itself. Now, I've never heard anything more stupid than that. But if someone wants to go along with such rubbish and try and make themselves and their audience and whoever else believe such nonsense, then that's on them in the future. You know, they know what they're doing, they're adults, they know that they're doing this, they know they're saying what they're saying. So, I mean, it's not my fault if I'm just pointing out where it's absolute and total and utter horse manure, which it is, right? And it all comes from, basically, I'm just going to show a second here, right? This is the flight data, the NTSB flight data, right? It all comes from, basically, they can't deal with this, which is the pitch. This is like over 2 hours here where it's a constant. There was engine issues, so after that it was a bit erratic. But here is a constant, and it's between this point and this point at 8:05 to 10:05 in the morning. That's what the pitch data looks like for most flights, regardless of the length of the flight. Most flights, once there's not weather issues or whatever, if it's a constant situation, on average, it will always look like that. Now, it has to look like this because it always has to be above the zero. They have to fly with an above horizontal pitch to be able to generate enough lift to account for the full weight of the plane, passengers, crew, you know, everything on board. They have to. They have no choice. It's just the nature's rules, whatever. So this is the problem. They can't deal with this because this orange line here shows that without a shadow of a doubt, and not that we didn't know this beforehand, but this just shows, you know, official data, there it's flat in the story. No ifs, buts, no maybes. But of course, people, even though I've dealt with this issue already, the way I'm going to deal with it now and their stupid claims will be a bit more visual, as I said earlier. But they just can't deal with this. They can't deal with this issue. So I don't care who's saying it. I don't care what their reputation is. I don't even care about what their profession is. It means nothing. Because anyone who's saying any different than they're just flying straight horizontal and they're not accounting for curvature is lying to themselves, if not just lying to others, or both. You know, it's either one or the other. You know, you're trying to fool yourself. So it doesn't matter to me if someone's an engineer, if someone's a pilot, if someone makes burgers for a living. I don't care. It's wrong, right? I don't care who you are, what your situation is. It's wrong, right? You're wrong, end of story. And it's like, they know they're wrong, especially if they're a pilot. They know they're wrong to be saying what they're saying. They know this, but they're going to say it anyway because they have a narrative to push, right? Or maybe they're just too proud to admit they're wrong in general, or admit that over the years that they've been wrong. Either way, I don't care, right? Point being is that they're making a particular claim, even though I've dealt with it in the past, This is going to be more visual, and it'll deal with it. It will be better maybe for people to share than what I put out in the past. What I put out in the past destroys it, but it's not as easy to explain and share. This will be easier to explain and share. Right? So, top of descent, right? This is what we're talking about. We're talking about landing. Now, there is also takeoff, and there's a separate argument in with the takeoff. The takeoff distance won't be as much as the landing distance, right? Because you're taking off at a greater, you're taking off at 12 degrees or something, as you're landing at 3 degrees. But there's other parts of the takeoff that are destructive, but I'm keeping that to myself for the moment. This is something I could have put out a long time ago. I knew about this from a long time back, and I kept it away, kept it to myself, because I knew the claims of our opposition concerning flight from a long time ago, and I kept it to myself. But now I've just decided, look, I'm just going to put it out here, even though it's not so much that it's new information, because other people have put out stuff like this in the past. Even Witsit put out something concerning this. But the point being is that it's how it's used and when you use it, right? And and who you use it on, and that's the important thing. So I'm going to first go to their claim. Now let's hope GeoGebra works for me, because it's been giving me a bit of hassle, right? It tends to do that when I need it to work with me. So their claim is as follows, right? This, right, is a tangent to their globe, right? There's two tangents here. There's one which I'm going to call a starting tangent. It's not horizontal, right? Even though in reality this is a horizontal line, right? In their world there is no horizontals, right? And the reason there's no horizontals, I'm going to show in a minute, is because what they're claiming is this is their starting point and their pitch is above this line here. But as they fly, right, the blue line is now their orientation. It was the red line, now it's the blue line. Yet they're trying to say that both of them are the same orientation. Now it's crazy, right? This is not the same orientation as that. But this is what they want to claim. It's ridiculous, but this is their basically this is their defense to the pitch data. Now it's not a defense, as we've seen them publicly demonstrate how badly it goes for them. They can't demonstrate what they're trying to claim because it goes against reality, so it can't be demonstrated. But this is what they want to claim. They want to claim that they're starting off in this position and this is happening. It's like, no, right? That would be a change in pitch, right? Right? There is only one horizontal, and in this, and it's the red line, right? Anything that the blue line is doing here is moving away from horizontal. It's not horizontal anymore. You can't use that as an orientation. This is now a pitch below horizontal. But they want to obviously claim stupidity, that it's just a tangent at one point, and if you go around the globe and the pitch is above this tangent, for the pitch of the plane, for absolutely no reason, because it makes no sense for that pitch to be above that, because the pitch is now below the red line, which will defy the lift effect, and basically in reality the plane would just smash into the ground. Point being, or at least be descending very fast, because once the core line of the wings are pitched below the red line, that's it. It's losing lift. It's going down, right? Don't care what type of wing, cambered wing, anything. It's losing lift, right? But I'm going to use for descent. I'm going to use 120 miles, and I'll show you how I calculated that now in a moment. So, right, from here, the starting point to 120 miles. If I just go to here, I'll zoom in a bit if I can. You can see the massive change in orientation. This was the orientation, and now it's this. So on their globe, this is the orientation change, right? This is what they're trying to claim is happening. And I'm using a length of, there's an arc length of 120 miles, right? And as I said, I'll explain that in a minute, right? So this is what they're trying to say is happening. That from this point here, 120 miles later, that's their orientation. But they're trying to say that the pitch data won't change. It'll look exactly the same. It's like, no, that's a pitch below. Just that, right? That would be a pitch below horizontal in reality. But in their world, as I said, there is no horizontal. Because in their world, the red line, or neither the red line nor the blue line is a horizontal. They're both just tangents to nowhere. They're nothing. But what people should realize is I'm using I think it's a 7 mile, it's 37,000 feet thereabouts altitude. This black line is the, just going to click on it there. This black line here is the altitude line, right? So that's about 37,000 feet above the surface of the globe, right? So that would be an altitude around the globe. So just like all tangents, right? That's going to be this point here. At every point along this black dotted line, right, there's a new tangent being created, a new orientation of tangent. And if I keep on going, you can see, right, the orientation keeps changing. Because what you're talking about there is thousands upon thousands upon thousands of different orientated tangents, right? Not two tangents, as I'm showing here. There's actually, within that, there's thousands of different orientated tangents, because a tangent touches a circle or a sphere at one point. So 1 foot is 1 point. The next foot is 1 point. The next foot is 1 point. That's 3 points, 3 changes in orientation in just 3 feet. And you're talking 120 miles of distance, right? So this is not like just 2 tangents. This is thousands upon thousands, maybe millions. You'll be talking whatever amount of feet, let's just say, if you want to call 1 foot a point, you'll be talking whatever amount of feet is in 120 miles. There's 5,200 feet in 1 mile. So it's 5,280 feet by 120, right? So you're talking thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands of different points along this circle, right? And they be corresponding to points along the surface of their globe. Exactly the same thing, thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands of tangents, right? So I'm just going to move that there so you can see it. Now, 120 miles, there is the orientation difference, right? So I'm just going to come out and show. So now come down here and move in here a little bit. As I said, GeoGebra's messing up on me, messing around with me at the moment. So it's been doing it recently. It's like GeoGebra's doing its best to make sure I don't get to make videos and stuff. So I'm just going to come in here and I'll stop. Oh, I'm not losing it now. Sorry. As I said, GeoGebra is making things difficult on me. Right, and we'll come back to that in a second. First of all, I want to come to here. Now, so, how do commercial pilots calculate their descent? Commercial pilots calculate their descent by determining a top of descent point and then planning their descent rate to meet the required approach parameters. This involves calculating the distance needed to descend to a target altitude, accounting for ground speed and desired descent angle. Typically 3 degrees. The top of descent is the point where the pilot initiates the descent maneuver. Right, I'm not going to go through every part of it, but I'll read some of it. But the point of this top of descent is, what a pilot will do is, if they're flying at 30, I have it at 37,000 feet, and if the airport is at 5,000, is at 3,000 feet elevation, they're going to want to come in at 1,000 feet above the airport as kind of an average, if I remember correctly. So if they're flying at 37,000 feet and the airport is 4,000 feet in elevation, right? If it's a high airport, or 2,000 feet, let's just say, and they want to come in 1,000 feet above that, then they're going to calculate for 34,000 feet. So they're going to subtract that 3,000, the 1,000, the 2,000 of elevation of the airport, and the 1,000, right, foot that they want to end up above the airport for when they come into land. So this is the descent, so they get into the position where they're 1,000 feet above the airport and they come into land. Now, I'm using a situation where the airport is at more or less sea level, and I'm using a situation where the pilot is accounting for 36,000 feet, right? Because there is 1,000, it's flying at 37,000 feet. There's 1,000 feet that the pilot will want to be above the airport, so the pilot is accounting for 36,000 feet, right? So altitude difference, determining the top of descent. The pilot first calculates the difference between their current altitude and the target altitude for the approach, right? So obviously what we've just talked about more or less. Distance calculation, the common rule of thumb is to divide the altitude difference by 300. This gives an approximate distance in nautical miles. I'm using statute miles, where the pilot should start descending to maintain a 3-degree descent angle. For example, if the altitude difference is 6,000 feet, they should start descending no later than 20 miles from the target altitude. Right. Ground speed consideration. More precise calculations might involve ground speed, as a faster ground speed means the aircraft will cover ground more quickly, requiring an earlier start to the descent. Calculating descent rate, ground speed, and distance, descent rate calculation. Right, the pilot can then, right, so basically, without reading all of it out, right, you can go and see it yourself. Right, they're using trigonometry. That's what they do. They're using a right angle triangle, right. Here is the proof. This is what they're doing, right? Right angle triangle. That's how they're determining it. So this here, this is the line up here. This will be the one that from here. I'll actually show on this one because it has the full triangle here. So this is their altitude, right? This is the distance they need to calculate to the airport, right? To where they want to be 1,000 feet above the airport, and that is the 3-degree angle they're hoping to have as a descent angle, right? This is how they work it, basically, right? It's the same, right? No matter what way you work it, they're hoping to come in 35,000 feet and 3 degrees, and they're working it all out, right? So they're using trigonometry. That means that this baseline here, the adjacent, right? Oh, sorry, I'll show this one. The adjacent here, right, has to be a horizontal. There's no straight line. There's no if buts, no maybes. That's how it has to happen. They have to calculate it this way. This is how commercial planes, you go to any big airport, you go to Heathrow, LAX, John F. Kennedy, any big airport anywhere in the world, and all these planes, like a great one is LAX, because if you're staying in the area of LAX, where there's hotels and motels and different things like that, you're constantly seeing planes coming in, right? So these planes are coming in constantly dealing with, right, trigonometric function, right? Now, obviously, a lot of that has been done for them by the plane these days, but the point is, it's the same thing that they're doing. They're using trigonometry to determine, how they can come in at about 2.5, 3-degree descent angle, right? So what I did was so I'm going to use 36,000 feet because I'm at 30. I'm calculating the altitude is 37,000 feet. So I'm going to obviously subtract the 1,000 foot from that. 36,000 feet, right? And I'm going to divide it by 300 equals 120. That means there's 120 miles, right? So this straight line here has to be 120 miles long. So, which leads us back to GeoGebra. Now, earlier I pointed out with the tangent that, right, let's hope this doesn't mess up on me, right, I'll go back to the tangent, right, I pointed out with the tangent that this is a series of points, right, for 120 miles, a series of points, point after point after point. Let's say every foot is 1 point, let's just say. So that's so between 1 foot and 3 foot, that's 3 different tangents, 3 different orientations. That means at no point can they have horizontal baseline, because the tangents aren't anything, they're just a straight line that's meeting a circle or sphere at 1 point. That's thousands and thousands of points making one big massive arc length, right? That's what it has to be within their claim. This is not the official claim, but this is the people we're dealing with, right? So, and I'll come back now. I know George is running slow. I could be lucky, could be unlucky with this, right? And I could come in here. Now, when you use what pilots actually use to determine, right, landing, right? I'm using an arc length again here of 120 miles, right? And when I show this, right, Hopefully I can come in, right? What happens is, I know it's a bit slow, GeoGebra is messing around, but that's good enough, you can see. Right, what happens is, there is the straight line, right? So K here, right, it's at K here that they're supposed to be 1,000 feet, sorry about that, stop, it's messing around, it's supposed to be 1,000 feet above the airport, but it's actually, sorry now, but GeoGebra is only messing me around. It's supposed to be 1,000 feet above the airport. We have another thing here. But it's actually, if you look at it there a second ago, it was shown to be 1.8 plus miles above what will be their airport. So instead of, there we are, instead of the pilot, if the pilot flying around the globe, then suddenly for the descent into the airport had to use trigonometry, what's going to happen is they're going to end up not at 1,000 feet above the airport, if the airport is close to sea level, like somewhere like LAX is, right? They're going to end up at almost 2 miles. And that's based off of a 37,000 feet altitude. If they had a 42,000 foot altitude, or 45,000 foot altitude, which some of the Learjets or something do have, then the descent is going to be, or this is going to be greater, because the amount of horizontal, because they need horizontal distance, the amount of horizontal distance they're going to be dealing with, the amount of horizontal distance they're going to be dealing with is going to increase. So that means that this number here is going to increase. It'll be more than 2 miles, it could be 3 miles that they'll be above the airport if you're talking about a globe. Whereas in reality, this is calculated so they'll end up at 1,000 foot. Not thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of feet above the airport, 1,000 feet above the airport. So it is impossible for them to use this function in reality and to be also flying around the globe. It's either they're flying around the globe and they're not using this function to determine the pitch data doesn't exist, the lift effect doesn't exist, and they're not using this function, right, when they're flying, or the Earth is a globe. So either the Earth is a globe, or pitch data, flight data, as it's given to us, is wrong and doesn't exist. The lift effect doesn't exist, and this function doesn't exist, and they don't use it. And remember, this is the same function they're using for takeoff as well. Right? It's just not as long of a distance. So, which is it? Right? So this completely disproves all that complete and utter nonsense about a different tangent and a different tangent and a different tangent and a different tangent. All of that is completely debunked. Right? So when any of these people, I don't care who they claim to be, if they claim to be pilots or anything else, if they're trying to claim anything but this, but flying horizontally, and horizontal being a constant orientation, right? If they're claiming anything but that, then they're lying. There is no if, buts, or they're completely delusional. Simple as, right? Because there is absolutely no way that this function can exist within aviation, right, and the Earth be a globe. It's that simple, right? But this function does exist. So you tell me, are those people making stuff up and telling lies to people and possibly lying to themselves, right? Or does this function, or are they telling the truth and this function doesn't exist? Flight data doesn't exist and the lift effect doesn't exist. Basically, airplanes wouldn't exist. Simple as. There is no if, buts, or maybes. They're debunked. Thanks for watching.